seated. So it's a joyful occasion, baptism, when we welcome the newly baptized into those who are following Jesus on the way. That's what baptism means. It means to say that William will be brought up and will live his life as one who follows Jesus in the company of others who do. So what will that mean for him? What are we doing in church? What is it? So if we look at the gospel today, people were following Jesus. They were out there in big crowds because he was healing them of their illness and giving them hope for living a life which was very difficult, where they were oppressed by the Roman occupying force, where they were taxed by the temple, and where life was very, very fragile. And in that life, Jesus came, inviting them to connect with him and with God and with one another in a community where life became new. And that's why they were there. And they kept following him. And they followed him up to the event where his work with the people was becoming inconvenient to the religious authorities and becoming inconvenient to the Roman occupiers, so they killed him. And yet, the experience of his disciples and friends was that Jesus was as alive, was more alive after his death than he was before it. That they continued to experience him with them in the breaking of the bread. So this candle, this paschal candle, we bring it out at funerals to remind us that life is more than the life we see. And we bring it out at baptism to remind us that we are baptized into Jesus' life, which includes into dying to ourselves so that we might live in God's realm. And the story about Jesus is a wonderful story. I love the story. You know, Jesus had been with people day in and day out, and he was tired. He needed some alone time. So he got into a boat, and he headed out, and then he came into the boat, and there was the crowd. And rather than saying, oh, God, let me get back in the boat, his heart was open. He had compassion for the people. And he healed them. And when his disciples had had enough, said, let's send these folks away, he said, no. Let's eat together. And the disciples said, well, we don't have anything. We have a few loaves of fish. We have a few loaves of bread and fish. Well, let's share what we have. So the church is that community where we show up because we need something. Our life is out of control. The life we try to manage for ourselves isn't working. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, where the life that you want isn't the life that you're getting. It's there in the story about Jacob. Jacob was really somebody who was contrived in life. As a child, he tricked his brother into giving up his inheritance so that he could have it. And then he tried to trick his father-in-law, prospective father-in-law, to get the wife he wanted. That didn't work out too well for him. And the story we read today is that his brother, the one he tricked, is on his trail with a whole group of out-of-armed followers. And Jacob is up all night, wrestling with, oh my God, what am I going to do now? So life is like that sometimes. When our best efforts to create the life we want just don't work. And so when that happens, we learn in the church to give that life over to God. To give it to God. And when we do, we get invited to follow in the way that Jesus leads. And when we do that, in the story today, we sit down with the people that God has given us, and that was a miracle, because people were very caste conscious. It mattered who you ate with. It mattered if the food was properly prepared, if it was clean or not clean. And all of that didn't matter anymore. You were sitting down with the folks you came with, you were sharing what you had, and there was plenty, enough to have lots left over. So we come to church to learn to live as God wants us to live, to give up our attempts to control our own lives, to live out of the values of hospitality, of sharing what we have, of not knowing how to control, but trusting that God will be with us. So that if we can do it in the church, we can even maybe do it with our own families, which is sometimes hard. So St. Mark's has made enormous strides. I love the way that we, in fact, are functioning as a community of hospitality. We look out for one another. We care about the young and the old. And if we don't, Rick Eaton in the back there will remind us. He carries that value in his heart. But it isn't just Rick. This morning, as we were coming in, Juliet gave me a picture of William, because she heard that I was going to see Doris after church today. Doris is our matriarch. She's 94, and she's kind of frail. She doesn't see too well. She doesn't hear too well, so she doesn't come and worship with us very often. But we do take a communion regularly, and I'm taking her communion today. And so I have this picture of William to take with me, and Justin and Juliet. This is going to be much more important than my visit or the communion, maybe I would say. Because it will remind her that she's connected into this family, which is ongoing. And we remember her. She's important to us. We're not sending her out to, oh, well, take care of yourself in an old age home. We're introducing. And last Sunday, I think, Dennis brought up the collection. Now, Dennis is two. Not collection, yeah, it was good. Anyway, and Drew, who's 6 months? 9, okay, was watching it. He's thinking, I can do that too. So we intend to be a community of hospitality where everybody comes. And we do a pretty good job of that. So then, we live our lives in our families where everybody comes. And that's challenging. How to balance that? It's not obvious. The world is changing, and the church is changing. The church in which we worship is not the same church that I grew up in. And the church that William grows up in will not be the same church that we are worshiping here today. So we are called, like the disciples, to pay attention to what Jesus is telling us, to do the unexpected, to stretch beyond where we think we can go, so that God's presence may be known, and we may grow together into that family that God longs to see. So thanks for being here, William. It's great that you're teaching us how to be church. I invite you to stand with me.